I stood in that courtroom, hands trembling against the wooden table, watching my own mother sit in the witness box as if she belonged there. Margaret Wilson, the woman who gave birth to me, was about to destroy my life with a single sentence. Her lips moved, and the words cut deeper than any knife ever could. She can barely hold a job. My daughter is irresponsible, unstable, and unfit. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her face. She didn't even look at me when she said it. This was the custody hearing for my 3-year-old daughter, Emma, the only pure thing left in my world. My own mother was testifying against me, telling the court I wasn't capable of raising my child. She wanted custody. She wanted to take Emma away because she believed I had failed at everything else. The evidence stacked against me felt like a mountain I couldn't climb. My lawyer looked defeated before we even started. I felt my dreams crumbling, the weight of everyone's judgment pressing down on my shoulders. Then a voice cut through the chaos from somewhere behind the judge's bench. A voice that would change everything. Let me take you back 2 years, back when I actually believed life could be fair. I was Emily Wilson, 28 years old, working as an associate attorney at Carter & Hayes, a small but respectable law firm in Boise, Idaho. Nothing fancy, but honest work. I helped families navigate divorces, custody battles, and estate planning, the kind of law that mattered to real people. My office overlooked the Boise River, and on clear mornings I could see the Owyhee Mountains in the distance while I drafted motions and reviewed contracts. Then I met James. James Russo, with his perfect smile and his supposedly successful logistics business. We dated for 8 months before he proposed at a restaurant I couldn't afford. His family had money, the kind that came with expectations and judgments, but I thought love could bridge those gaps. How naive I was. We married in a small ceremony. 6 months later, I got pregnant with Emma. James seemed thrilled at first, posting ultrasound pictures on social media, talking about being a father. I worked right up until my water broke, determined to prove I could handle both career and motherhood. Women do it every day, right? I could too. Emma came into the world screaming, a tiny force of nature with my eyes and James's stubborn chin. Those first weeks blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. But something felt wrong. James started coming home later. His phone was always face down on the table. He stopped asking about Emma's day. 3 months after giving birth, I found the text messages, pages of conversations with his executive assistant, a woman named Lauren. The messages were explicit, detailed, ongoing. They had been seeing each other since my 2nd trimester. While I was growing our child, he was sleeping with someone else in hotel rooms, downtown. I filed for divorce immediately, but James's family had resources I couldn't match. They hired Robert Klein, the most expensive family law attorney in Idaho, a man who wore $5,000 suits and treated courtrooms like his personal stage. Meanwhile, I represented myself because I couldn't afford anyone better while on maternity leave. The divorce proceedings were brutal, but what destroyed me was the postpartum depression that came crashing down like a tidal wave. Some days I couldn't get out of bed. The weight of betrayal, of being a single mother, of fighting a legal battle alone, it crushed something inside me. I started missing deadlines at work. Small things at first. A filing here, a client meeting there. My boss, Mr. Carter, called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon. "Emily, we need to talk about your performance." I tried to explain, tried to tell him about the divorce, the depression, how I was getting help. But law firms don't have patience for human weakness. They need billable hours and perfect work product. 3 weeks later, they let me go. Professional termination, they called it. My career, everything I had worked for since law school, gone. James pounced on that information like a predator. His lawyer filed an emergency motion claiming I was mentally unstable and financially irresponsible. The judge, an older man who seemed to look right through me, granted James temporary primary custody. I could only see my daughter on weekends, supervised visits at first until they decided I wasn't a danger to my own child. I tried to find another legal position, sending out 43 resumes in 2 months. But word travels fast in legal circles. Nobody wanted to hire the lawyer who got fired for poor performance. Nobody cared about the reasons why. So, I took a job at Riverfront Bistro serving coffee and sandwiches to people who used to be my peers. $12 an hour plus tips, just enough to cover rent on a tiny studio apartment in a cheaper part of town. For 6 months, I survived. Barely. I saw Emma every Saturday and Sunday, treasured every moment, and spent weeknights crying into my pillow. Then James's car was hit by a drunk driver on Interstate 84. He died instantly, the police told me on a Monday morning. I felt numb. Not grief exactly, but shock. The father of my child was gone. I assumed custody would revert to me automatically. That's how it works, right? The surviving parent gets the child. I started preparing Emma's room in my apartment, bought a toddler bed at a thrift store, painted the walls a soft yellow. Then my mother showed up at my door. Margaret Wilson stood there in her pressed slacks and cashmere sweater, looking at my apartment like it was contaminated. She had always been that way, measuring everything and everyone against her impossible standards. Growing up, nothing I did was ever good enough. Straight A's weren't enough because I didn't get perfect scores. Making the volleyball team wasn't enough because I wasn't captain. Getting into law school wasn't enough because it wasn't Yale. Emily, she said, not even saying hello, we need to discuss Emma's future. Her future is with me, Mom. I'm her mother. Margaret's face tightened. Are you? Because from what I see, you're a 28-year-old woman working at a coffee shop, living in a place barely big enough for one person, let alone a growing child. I'm getting back on my feet. James just died 2 weeks ago. Which is exactly why Emma needs stability. I'm filing for custody, Emily, for her own good. I laughed. Actually laughed because it seemed so absurd. You can't be serious. I've already hired Robert Klein, the same lawyer James used. He agrees that given your employment history, your mental health struggles, and your current living situation, Emma would be better off with me. I have a 3-bedroom house, a stable retirement income, and no history of instability. You're my mother. How can you do this? Margaret's eyes went cold. Because I'm also Emma's grandmother, and unlike you, I put her needs first. You've proven you can't take care of yourself, let alone a child. Someone has to protect that little girl from your failures. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway of my tiny apartment, feeling like the ground had opened beneath my feet. My own mother, the woman who was supposed to support me through the hardest time of my life, was now trying to take away the only thing I had left. That's how I ended up in that courtroom 3 months later, sitting next to Laura Kim, an overworked public defender who took my case pro bono but barely had time to prepare. Across the aisle sat Margaret, with Robert Klein, both of them looking confident and composed, while I felt like I was drowning. And now here we were, with my mother on the witness stand telling the judge that her own daughter was unfit to be a mother. Robert Klein stood up from his chair with the practiced ease of someone who had won 1,000 cases. He buttoned his suit jacket and approached my mother with a gentle smile, like they were old friends having tea. Mrs. Wilson, thank you for your testimony today. I know this must be difficult. Margaret dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I noticed she hadn't actually cried, but the gesture was perfect for the jury box that wasn't even there. This wasn't a jury trial, but she performed anyway. It is difficult, Mr. Klein, but I have to think of Emma. Of course. Can you tell the court about your daughter's employment history over the past 18 months? Margaret straightened in her chair. Emily was fired from Carter and Hayes law firm approximately 16 months ago. Since then, she's been unable to maintain steady employment. She was let go from a waitressing position at Maggie's Diner after 5 months. Then she worked briefly at a retail store, less than 3 months before they terminated her as well. Currently, she's working part-time at a coffee shop. I wanted to scream. She made it sound like I was chronically unemployed, bouncing from job to job. The truth was, I left Maggie's because they wanted me to work nights and weekends, which meant I couldn't see Emma. The retail job ended when the store closed down, but my mother presented it as evidence of my inadequacy. So, it would be fair to say, Klein continued, your daughter can barely hold a job. I'm afraid that's accurate. The words hung in the air, the same words that framed this nightmare. I felt eyes on me from every corner of the courtroom. The clerk, the bailiff, even the court reporter seemed to pause her typing to look at me with pity. Laura, my lawyer, scribbled notes but said nothing. She had warned me this would be hard. Klein walked back to his table and picked up a manila folder. Mrs. Wilson, are you aware of an incident that occurred 7 months ago involving your granddaughter? Margaret nodded gravely. Yes. Emily was supposed to pick up Emma from Tiny Tots preschool at 5:30 in the evening. She never showed up. The school called me in a panic at 6:15. My granddaughter was sitting alone in the office crying, asking where her mommy was. The judge, a stern-looking man in his 60s named Judge Thompson, glanced at me with narrowed eyes. I felt my face burn with shame. What happened? Klein asked. Emily claimed her car broke down and her cell phone died, Margaret said. But this is exactly the kind of irresponsibility I'm talking about. What if it happens again? What if next time there's a real emergency? I gripped the edge of the table. Yes, my car had broken down, a blown tire on the highway. And yes, my phone had died because I couldn't afford to replace the battery. But I had called the school from a gas station payphone as soon as I could. They had already called my mother by then. One incident, one time, and now it was being used as proof I was negligent. Klein introduced more evidence, medical records showing I had been prescribed antidepressants after Emma's birth. He made it sound sinister, dangerous. Mrs. Wilson, were you aware your daughter was taking medication for depression? I was. And while I understand postpartum depression is real, Emily's condition seemed to affect her ability to function. She missed family gatherings, stopped returning phone calls. There were days she wouldn't even answer the door. Everything she said was technically true, but stripped of context. Depression after my husband's betrayal and my career collapse wasn't weakness. It was a normal human response to trauma. But in that courtroom, it sounded like evidence of instability. Then Klein called his next witness, my former manager from Riverfront Bistro, a middle-aged man named Stephen Brooks. He looked uncomfortable taking the stand. Mr. Brooks, Emily Wilson worked for you, correct? Yes, sir. For about 8 months now. And how would you describe her performance? Stephen shifted in his seat. Look, Emily's a hard worker. She really is. But she's often tired. She's been late a few times. Maybe 4 or 5 times in 8 months. And there were a couple of shifts where she seemed distracted, made some mistakes with orders. 4 times late in 8 months because I was taking 2 buses to get to work, and sometimes they ran behind schedule. Mistakes with orders because I was working 10-hour shifts on my feet while studying legal textbooks every night. But presented this way, it sounded like I was barely competent at serving coffee. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Laura tried to cross-examine, asking Stephen if I had ever missed a shift or called in sick unnecessarily. He admitted I hadn't, But the damage was done. Then it was my turn to take the stand. My legs felt weak as I walked to the witness box. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. And nothing but the truth. If only the truth mattered as much as the presentation. Klein approached me like a shark circling prey. "Miss Wilson, you were fired from your position at Carter and Hayes. Can you explain why?" I was going through a difficult time. My marriage was ending. I had a new baby, and I was dealing with postpartum depression. I made some mistakes at work. Mistakes? Did these mistakes harm any clients? No. But did you miss filing deadlines? 2 deadlines, yes. In the legal profession, deadlines are critical, are they not? Yes. And yet you missed them because you couldn't handle the pressure. I wanted to explain about James's betrayal, about crying in the bathroom during lunch breaks, about trying to pump breast milk in a storage closet while working 60-hour weeks. But Klein didn't give me space to explain. "Miss Wilson, what is your current employment?" "I work at Riverfront Bistro." "Doing what, exactly?" "I'm a barista and server." "And how much do you make per hour?" My throat tightened. $12 an hour plus tips." "And how many hours per week do you work?" "About 25 to 30. Klein pulled out a calculator, making a show of it. "So, roughly $300 to $360 per week before taxes. Is that sufficient to support yourself and a 3-year-old child?" "I'm also studying. I'm working toward—" "Miss Wilson, please answer the question. Is that income sufficient?" "It's tight, but I manage." "You manage? In a studio apartment, that's what? 400 square feet? 500 square feet? Where would your daughter sleep?" "I have a toddler bed set up in the corner. There's plenty of room." Klein's expression dripped with disdain. A corner of a studio apartment while Mrs. Wilson has a 3-bedroom house with a yard, a playroom, and financial stability. "Tell me, Miss Wilson, at 28 years old, why are you still working minimum wage jobs and studying? When will you have a real career?" The words landed like slaps. I felt tears pressing behind my eyes but refused to let them fall. "I'm working on getting my legal career back. I'm taking online courses to reinstate my bar license in another state." "At 28, you're still in school. Most people have established careers by your age. Don't you think your daughter deserves stability instead of a mother who's still trying to figure out her life?" Laura objected. "Your Honor, counsel is badgering the witness." Judge Thompson nodded. Sustained. "Mr. Klein, ask your questions without the commentary." But the damage was done. I could see it in the judge's face, in the way he looked at me. A 28-year-old woman working at a coffee shop, living in a tiny apartment, studying for exams that might never lead anywhere. On paper, I looked exactly like what my mother claimed, someone who couldn't hold a job, couldn't provide stability, couldn't be trusted with the responsibility of raising a child. Klein finished his questioning. I stepped down from the witness stand, feeling like I had just lost everything. Judge Thompson called for a 15-minute recess. I walked out into the courthouse hallway on shaky legs. Laura followed me, her expression sympathetic but defeated. "I'm sorry, Emily. I know this is hard." "She's going to win, isn't she? My own mother is going to take my daughter." Laura hesitated. "The evidence is heavily in her favor. Your mother has financial stability, a proper home, no employment issues. And with your history—" "My history of being human, of struggling after my husband cheated on me and my career fell apart." "I know. It's not fair. But family court judges care about stability above everything else, and right now, on paper, your mother looks like the stable option." I leaned against the cold courthouse wall, feeling the fight drain out of me. Through the window, I could see the city of Boise going about its day, people walking to lunch, living their normal lives, while mine crumbled inside this building. "I need you to prepare yourself," Laura said quietly. We should probably start discussing visitation schedules. Visitation, like I would be a guest in my own daughter's life. I closed my eyes and thought of Emma's face, her laugh, the way she called me mommy, like it was the most important word in the world. I couldn't lose her. I wouldn't survive it. The bailiff called us back into the courtroom. I returned to my seat, feeling like I was walking to my own execution. My mother sat across the aisle, not looking at me. She stared straight ahead, composed and confident. Judge Thompson settled into his chair. "Are we ready to continue?" Klein stood. "Your Honor, the petitioner rests." All eyes turned to Laura. She stood slowly. "Your Honor, the respondent has no further witnesses at this time." It was over. My entire defense consisted of me trying to explain myself while Klein tore me apart. I had no character witnesses because I had isolated myself during the Depression. No financial records to prove stability because I had none. No impressive job to point to. Nothing. Judge Thompson picked up his pen. "Very well. I'll review the evidence and issue a ruling within." The courtroom door opened. Everyone turned. A man in his early 50s walked in, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. He had silver hair, sharp eyes, and carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. He walked with purpose straight toward our table. "Your Honor, I apologize for my tardiness. May I approach?" Judge Thompson frowned. "And you are?" "David Bennett, Your Honor. I've been retained to represent Miss Emily Wilson in this matter." He handed paperwork to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. I stared at him in complete confusion. I had never seen this man before in my life. Laura looked equally baffled. Judge Thompson reviewed the documents. "This appears to be in order, Mr. Bennett. You're aware we're in the middle of proceedings." "I am, Your Honor. I apologize again for the delay. There was an issue with my flight from Denver. However, I believe I have critical testimony that will significantly impact this case." Klein stood up, clearly annoyed. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We're at the conclusion of testimony." "Mr. Bennett," Judge Thompson said, "what testimony do you have?" "I'd like to recall Mrs. Margaret Wilson to the stand, Your Honor, and I have an additional witness who just arrived." My heart pounded. Who was this man? How could I afford someone like him? But I didn't question it out loud. This was the first glimpse of hope I had felt in 3 months. Judge Thompson considered. "Very well. Mrs. Wilson, please return to the witness stand." My mother's confident expression flickered for just a moment. She walked back to the witness box, and I noticed her hands weren't quite as steady as before. David Bennett opened his briefcase and pulled out a file. He smiled at my mother, but it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted wounded prey. David Bennett approached my mother with measured steps, each movement calculated and precise. He held a single sheet of paper, though his briefcase clearly contained much more. Margaret sat in the witness box, trying to maintain her composure, but I saw her jaw tighten. "Mrs. Wilson, you've testified extensively about your daughter's inability to maintain employment, correct?" "Yes, that's correct." "And you believe this instability makes her unfit to care for her daughter, your granddaughter, Emma?" "I do. A child needs consistency." Bennett nodded slowly. "Consistency? That's interesting. Tell me, Mrs. Wilson, how often do you see Emma currently?" Margaret shifted. "I try to see her every week." "You try. Can you be more specific about the actual number of visits in the past 6 months?" I visit when I can, at least once or twice a month." Bennett pulled out a document from his file. "Your Honor, this is a visitation log from Tiny Tots Preschool showing every person who picked up Emma Wilson over the past 6 months. Mrs. Wilson appears on this log exactly 4 times. 4 visits in 6 months." Does that sound accurate? Margaret's face flushed. I have responsibilities of my own, but that doesn't mean… So, less than once per month. Yet you're seeking full custody of a child you see 4 times in half a year. I would see her more if she lived with me. That's the entire point. Right. Because you care so deeply about consistency. Bennett pulled another document. Mrs. Wilson, during the 18 months that your daughter has been struggling, financially, working minimum wage jobs, dealing with depression, how much financial support have you provided her? Silence. Mrs. Wilson, did you ever offer to help with rent, groceries, childcare expenses? I believed Emily needed to learn independence. Independence? Or did you want to watch her fail so you could swoop in and prove you were right about her? Klein jumped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is making accusations without foundation. Sustained, Judge Thompson said. Mr. Bennett, stick to questions. Bennett didn't miss a beat. Mrs. Wilson, when Emily was fired from Carter and Hayes, did she tell you why? She said she made mistakes because she was overwhelmed. Did you ask what happened? Did you offer support? Did you, as her mother, try to help her through one of the most difficult periods of her life? Margaret's voice rose. I am her mother, not her therapist. I raised her to be strong, to handle adversity. If she couldn't manage, you would be there to tell her she failed. Is that it? That's not what I… Let me ask you something else, Mrs. Wilson. You've painted a picture of your daughter as perpetually unstable, unable to hold employment. But do you actually know what she's been doing for the past 6 months? She's been working at that coffee shop, barely making ends meet. Bennett turned to address Judge Thompson directly. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence of Miss Wilson's activities over the past 6 months. He handed a stack of documents to the bailiff. I had no idea what he was talking about. What activities? My life had been work, study, sleep, repeat. Bennett turned back to my mother. Mrs. Wilson, did you know that your daughter has been taking online legal courses through Georgetown University? Margaret's eyes widened slightly. No. Did you know she completed a full 24-credit program in family law, graduating with highest honors? No, I didn't know that. My hands started shaking. How did he know I had finished that program 3 weeks ago? I hadn't told anyone because I was terrified it wouldn't lead anywhere. Did you know, Bennett continued, his voice growing stronger, that Emily passed the Colorado State Bar examination 2 months ago, scoring in the top 5% of all test takers? The courtroom erupted in whispers. Laura grabbed my arm, her mouth open in shock. I had passed, yes, but I didn't think anyone knew yet. The results had only been posted online 5 days ago. Margaret sat frozen. She never told me. Perhaps because you never asked. Perhaps because every conversation with you has been about her failures rather than her struggles or her victories. But here's what you definitely don't know, Mrs. Wilson. Bennett pulled out an official-looking letter. 3 days ago, Emily Wilson received an offer of employment from the Denver County Prosecutor's Office in Denver, starting salary of $75,000 per year with full benefits, beginning in 2 weeks. I couldn't breathe. That email, I had received it on Thursday night, read it 12 times, afraid it was a mistake. I hadn't responded yet because I didn't dare believe it was real. The courtroom exploded. Judge Thompson banged his gavel. Order! Margaret looked like she had been slapped. I don't understand. She's been working at a coffee shop. She's been working at a coffee shop while rebuilding her entire career from the ground up, while caring for her daughter every weekend, while dealing with depression and poverty and a custody battle initiated by her own mother. And she succeeded. Bennett turned to address the judge again. Your Honor, Emily Wilson isn't unstable. She's resilient. She didn't sit around feeling sorry for herself when her marriage ended and her career collapsed. She got back up. She studied while other people slept. She took the hardest bar exam in the country and passed with flying colors. And she did it all while being the mother that Mrs. Wilson claims she isn't. Klein stood up. Your Honor, this is all very dramatic, but it doesn't change Miss Wilson's history. She was fired. She has struggled financially. She has a history of depression. Bennett spun to face him. She was fired because she refused to participate in a cover-up. Do you want to know why Emily Wilson was really terminated from Carter and Hayes? He pulled out another file, this one thicker. 14 months ago, Miss Wilson discovered that one of the firm's major clients, a real estate developer, was committing systematic fraud in property valuations. She reported it to her supervisor, was told to ignore it, and when she refused, she filed a complaint with the Idaho State Bar Association. 2 weeks later, she was fired under the pretense of poor performance. More documents went to the judge, emails, copies of the ethics complaint, correspondence with the Bar Association. Her firing wasn't about competence, Your Honor. It was retaliation for refusing to be complicit in fraud. The State Bar investigated and found merit in her complaint. The firm is currently under review. Emily Wilson lost her job because she chose integrity over her career. I sat there stunned. David Bennett had investigated my entire life, things I had been too ashamed to mention, too afraid would make me look worse. He had found the truth buried under the narrative everyone else had created. Margaret's face had gone pale. She gripped the edge of the witness box. Bennett wasn't finished. So, let's review, shall we? Emily Wilson was betrayed by her husband. She reported corruption at her law firm and was fired for it. She suffered postpartum depression, a recognized medical condition, and sought treatment. She worked 3 jobs in 18 months, not because she's unstable, but because she was doing whatever it took to survive and provide for her daughter while also studying to resurrect her career. And she succeeded. That's not instability, Mrs. Wilson. That's strength. He turned back to my mother. One more question. Did you know any of this before today? Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. No. Why not? Because I didn't ask. You didn't ask because you didn't want to know. You wanted your narrative. The failing daughter you could rescue. The granddaughter you could raise the right way because your daughter couldn't. You wanted to be proven right more than you wanted to support your own child. That's not true, isn't it? You said yourself in your original petition for custody that Emily has always been weak and needed someone stronger to make decisions for her. I have your own words right here. Margaret looked at me for the first time since the questioning began. Her eyes were wet, her composed mask cracking. I was trying to help. By taking away the one thing she's fighting to protect? By publicly declaring her a failure? That's not help, Mrs. Wilson. That's cruelty dressed up as concern. Judge Thompson held up his hand. Mr. Bennett, I think we've established your point. Do you have further questions? Just one, Your Honor. Mrs. Wilson, if you were genuinely concerned about Emma's welfare, why didn't you offer to help Emily rather than sue her for custody? Why not offer financial support, childcare, a place to stay while she got back on her feet? Margaret opened her mouth, but no words came out. We all knew the answer, because helping me wouldn't have proven her right, wouldn't have given her control, wouldn't have allowed her to finally show the world that I was the disappointment she had always said I was. No further questions, Bennett said quietly. Klein tried to rehabilitate on redirect. Mrs. Wilson, regardless of Mr. Bennett's implications, you still maintain that Emma would benefit from your custody, correct? I just want what's best for her. And you believe your home, Your stability would provide that. Margaret hesitated. For the first time in my entire life, I saw doubt in my mother's eyes. I thought so, but I didn't know about the job offer. I didn't know she had passed the bar exam. Would that have changed your petition? Longer silence. I don't know. Klein sat down, looking frustrated. He had lost control of his own witness. Judge Thompson looked at Bennett. Do you have additional witnesses, Mr. Bennett? I do, Your Honor. If the court permits, I'd like to call my final witness. Proceed. Bennett walked to the courtroom doors and opened them. A woman entered, and the moment I saw her, my confusion deepened. She was in her early 50s, professionally dressed in a black suit, carrying herself with quiet authority. She had kind eyes but a firm set to her jaw. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Magistrate Catherine Lawrence. The title hit like a thunderclap. A magistrate, a judge, walking into our custody hearing as a witness. Margaret's face went from pale to white as paper. Catherine Lawrence walked to the witness stand with steady grace, was sworn in, and sat down. She looked directly at me and smiled slightly, a gesture of reassurance I didn't understand. Bennett stood before her. Magistrate Lawrence, thank you for coming today. Can you please tell the court how you know Emily Wilson? Catherine's voice was clear and confident. Emily Wilson has been working with me for the past 3 months as a judicial extern in Denver County Family Court. The courtroom went silent. Even Judge Thompson leaned forward. Can you elaborate on that position? Bennett asked. Certainly. A judicial extern is a newly licensed attorney who works directly with a sitting judge to gain practical experience in court procedures. It's a highly competitive position. We had 73 applicants this year. Emily was selected based on her bar exam scores, her ethical record with the Idaho State Bar, and her compelling personal statement about understanding the struggles of families in crisis. I felt dizzy. The email I had received wasn't just a job offer. It was connected to something bigger, something I hadn't fully understood. Bennett continued. And what has been your assessment of Miss Wilson's abilities? Catherine looked at Judge Thompson. May I speak freely, Your Honor? He nodded. She turned to the courtroom. Emily Wilson is one of the most dedicated, compassionate, and capable legal minds I've encountered in 20 years on the bench. She understands family, law, not just academically, but personally. She's seen the system from both sides, and I can say without hesitation that any family who appears before her will receive fair, thoughtful, and deeply empathetic judgment. Margaret made a small sound, almost a gasp. Bennett nodded slowly. You said, appears before her. Can you clarify what you mean? Catherine pulled a document from her jacket pocket. As of 2 weeks ago, Emily Wilson was confirmed by the Colorado State Judicial Selection Committee as the newest family court judge in Denver County. She's been a sitting judge for 3 weeks. Wait. No, that wasn't right. 3 weeks? Not 3 years? I hadn't even started yet. Bennett must have seen my confusion because he quickly corrected. I apologize, Magistrate Lawrence. You meant 3 weeks? Correct? Not 3 years? Catherine smiled. You're absolutely right. My apologies. 3 weeks. Though given her performance in that short time, it feels like she's been doing this much longer. But the impact had already been made. The number didn't matter. What mattered was the title. Judge. I was a judge. Margaret stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly. No, that's not possible. My daughter is working at a coffee shop. She's been fired. She's unstable. She can't even... Judge Thompson banged his gavel. Mrs. Wilson, sit down. But my mother couldn't seem to hear him. She stared at me with wild eyes. You're lying, all of you. This is some kind of trick. Emily can barely hold a job. I know my own daughter. Catherine spoke calmly from the witness stand. Mrs. Wilson, I have the confirmation documents right here if you'd like to see them. Emily has been working with me while keeping her coffee shop job to maintain income during the transition period. That's not instability. That's prudence. Margaret sank back into her chair, all the fight draining out of her. She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. Maybe she had never really seen me at all. Bennett turned to Judge Thompson. Your Honor, I think the question before this court has been definitively answered. Emily Wilson is not unstable. She is not incapable. She is not unfit. She is a respected professional about to take a seat on the bench of family court. The idea that she cannot care for her own daughter is not just wrong, it's absurd. He pulled out one more document. I have one final piece of evidence, Your Honor. Mrs. Margaret Wilson's financial records for the past 12 months. Margaret's head snapped up. What? You can't… These are public records, Mrs. Wilson, obtained legally through a court order based on your custody petition. When you filed for custody, you claimed superior financial stability, but these records tell a different story. He handed the papers to the bailiff. Your Honor, Mrs. Wilson has accumulated $42,000 in gambling debts over the past year. She's taken out a second mortgage on her home. She has 3 credit cards maxed out, and according to foreclosure notices filed last month, her bank is beginning proceedings to repossess her house. She has 90 days before forced sale. The room erupted again. Klein looked at his client in shock. This was clearly news to him, too. Margaret shook her head. It's not as bad as it sounds. I had some bad luck with online poker, but I can fix it. Can you? Bennett asked. Because your original petition stated you wanted custody to provide a stable home, but you don't have a stable home. In 3 months, you won't have a home at all. Margaret's shoulders started shaking. For the first time, she looked small and old. Bennett pressed on, though his voice softened slightly. Mrs. Wilson, I need to ask you directly. What was your real motivation for seeking custody of Emma? I wanted to help. Help? How? Margaret's voice cracked. There's a trust fund from James's family for Emma. Whoever has custody receives disbursements to cover her expenses, $2,000 a month. There it was. The truth underneath everything. My mother needed money and saw my daughter as a solution. She had wrapped it in concern and judgment, in all the old patterns of our relationship, but at its core, this was about her desperate financial situation. So, to be clear, Bennett said, you weren't protecting Emma from an unfit mother. You were protecting yourself from bankruptcy. Margaret covered her face with her hands and cried. Real tears this time, not performed ones. The sound filled the courtroom, ugly and broken. I felt something twist in my chest. Anger, yes, but also pity. My mother had spent my entire life trying to prove I wasn't good enough, and now she had to face the reality that she was the one falling apart. Judge Thompson spoke, his voice heavy. Mr. Bennett, do you have further witnesses? No, Your Honor. I believe the facts speak for themselves. Robert Klein stood slowly. He looked at Margaret, then at me, then at the judge. Your Honor, after reviewing the new evidence presented today, I must advise the court that I am withdrawing from this case. I was not made aware of my client's financial situation or the true circumstances surrounding Miss Wilson's employment. I cannot, in good conscience, continue to represent a petition I now believe lacks merit. Margaret grabbed his sleeve. You can't leave me, we had an agreement. Klein gently extracted himself from her grip. Mrs. Wilson, I'm sorry, but my professional obligations are clear. I cannot proceed with a case built on incomplete or misleading information. He gathered his files and walked out of the courtroom, leaving my mother sitting alone at her table. Judge Thompson looked at her. Mrs. Wilson, do you wish to continue pro se, or do you want to request a continuance? To retain new counsel? Margaret looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in 28 years. Her face was streaked with tears and mascara. All her carefully constructed composure was gone. I can't believe this, she whispered. You were a judge this whole time, and you didn't tell me. You didn't ask, Mom. You never asked about anything that didn't fit your version of who you thought I was. But you're my daughter. I'm supposed to protect you. You're supposed to love me. There's a difference. Judge Thompson cleared his throat. Mrs. Wilson, I need an answer. Do you wish to proceed? Margaret looked down at her hands. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. No, Your Honor. I withdraw my petition. Relief crashed over me like a wave. It was over. But Judge Thompson wasn't finished. Very well. Petition withdrawn. However, given the evidence presented here today, I'm going to make some additional orders. Mrs. Wilson, you will be permitted supervised visitation with your granddaughter twice per month, pending completion of a family counseling program. Both you and Miss Wilson will participate in family therapy to address the underlying issues in your relationship. Do you understand? Margaret nodded numbly. Miss Wilson, the judge said, looking at me now. Full custody is awarded to you, effective immediately. However, I strongly encourage you to allow your mother the opportunity to rebuild a healthy relationship with both you and Emma, should she complete the required counseling. Yes, Your Honor, I managed to say. My voice sounded like it was coming from far away. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a final bang. The courtroom slowly emptied. I sat in my chair, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. Laura sat next to me, gripping my hand. Did we just win? I asked. Yes, she laughed, wiping tears from her own eyes. Yes, Emily, you won. David Bennett approached our table and set down his briefcase. Up close, I could see silver threading through his dark hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He looked like someone who had spent years in courtrooms fighting battles just like this one. Who are you? I asked. I never hired you. I couldn't possibly afford you. Bennett smiled. You're right. You didn't hire me. But someone noticed your case. The Idaho State Bar has a program that monitors attorneys who report ethical violations. When you filed your complaint against Carter and Hayes, you were flagged as someone who stood up for what was right at great personal cost. When your custody case was filed, it came across my desk at the Northwest Legal Defense Fund. We take cases pro bono for attorneys who have been retaliated against. I don't understand. Why wouldn't someone have told me? Because we wanted to investigate first, make sure we had the full picture. I spent the last 6 weeks gathering evidence, verifying your story, tracking down records. I knew if we were going to win, we needed overwhelming proof, not just of your competency, but of the truth behind everything that happened to you. Catherine Lawrence approached us. She extended her hand to me. Congratulations, Judge Wilson. I took her hand, still dazed. I'm not a judge yet. I mean, I haven't even started. I know. I misspoke in the heat of the moment. Forgive me. But Emily, you've been working with me long enough for me to know that you're going to be an exceptional judge. That wasn't an exaggeration. But how did you even know about this hearing? Catherine glanced at Bennett. He called me yesterday, explained the situation. I cleared my calendar immediately. No judge wants to see one of our own treated unfairly, especially over custody of her own child. What your mother did, what she said about you, it was wrong. And I wanted to make sure the court understood who you really are. I felt tears building again. Thank you. I don't even know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Just be the judge I know you can be." She squeezed my shoulder and left. Laura excused herself to file the final paperwork, leaving me alone with Bennett. "There's something I still don't understand," I said. "My mother, the gambling debts. How did you find out about that?" Bennett hesitated. "That part was easier than you might think. When someone files for custody, their finances become relevant. I subpoenaed her bank records as part of discovery. What I found alarmed me. The debt, the second mortgage, the foreclosure notices. It painted a very different picture than the stable grandmother she was presenting to the court. But why would she do this? She had to have known I'd find out eventually. Desperate people make desperate choices. Emily, your mother is drowning financially. She saw your situation and thought she could solve two problems at once: secure the trust fund money and convince herself she was doing it for Emma's benefit. It's easier to justify terrible actions when you believe you're being noble." I looked across the courtroom. My mother still sat at her empty table, staring at nothing. She looked broken. "I should hate her," I said quietly. "After everything she just put me through. But I just feel sad." "That's because you're a good person. And probably because, despite everything, she's still your mother." Bennett packed his briefcase. "For what it's worth, the therapy Judge Thompson ordered might actually help if she's willing to do the work." "What if she's not?" "Then you'll know you tried, and Emma will grow up with a mother who protected her and taught her what real strength looks like." Bennett handed me his business card. "If you need anything as you transition into your new position, call me. And Emily, what you did, fighting your way back from rock bottom while everyone was watching you fall, that took more courage than most people ever find. Be proud of that." He left, and I was finally alone in the courtroom. I walked slowly to where my mother sat. She looked up at me, eyes red and swollen. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I don't know if I can. Not right now." "I know." She twisted a tissue in her hands. "I told myself I was doing the right thing, that Emma needed stability you couldn't provide. But the truth is, I've never believed you were good enough for anything. And when you started to fail, it confirmed everything I'd always thought about you. It made me feel like I had been right all along." The honesty was startling and painful. "You were my mother, Mom. You were supposed to believe in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. Especially then." "I know. I failed you. I've been failing you your whole life." She stood up, unsteady. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. I should have said that years ago. I should have said it every day. You're stronger than I ever was. Then do the therapy. Work on yourself. Because Emma deserves a grandmother who loves her without conditions. And maybe someday we can figure out what a relationship between us looks like." "Can I hug you?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, to walk away and never look back. But I thought about Emma, about what I wanted to teach her about forgiveness and boundaries and complicated love. "Okay." My mother's arms wrapped around me and she sobbed into my shoulder. I stood stiff at first, then slowly returned the embrace. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was an acknowledgement of pain, of damage, of the long road ahead. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "I know, Mom. I know." We stood there in the empty courtroom, two broken women trying to figure out how to heal. Denver looked different from my new office window. The view stretched across the South Platte River, with the Rocky Mountains rising in the distance. On clear days like this, Pikes Peak stood like a guardian watching over the city. My office was small, but mine. Judge Emily Wilson. The nameplate on the door read. Every time I saw it, I felt a small shock of disbelief. Emma sat on the carpet behind my desk, surrounded by coloring books and crayons. She was humming to herself, completely content. We had moved to Denver 2 weeks ago, found a 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill with a small yard. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. All ours. A knock on the door. Catherine Lawrence poked her head in. "Ready for your first day on the bench?" My stomach flipped. I'm terrified. "Good. That means you care." She came in and sat in the chair across from my desk. "What's your case today?" "Custody dispute. Mother seeking primary custody. Father claiming she's unstable due to job loss and depression." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Sound familiar?" "Uncomfortably so." "Then you'll bring perspective others wouldn't have. Just remember, listen to everyone, believe nothing until you see evidence, and always put the child first." "What if I make the wrong decision?" "You will sometimes. We all do. But if you make decisions based on facts and compassion, you'll get it right more often than not." Emma looked up from her coloring. "Mommy, is today your special day?" "Yes, baby. Mommy's going to be a judge today." "What's a judge?" I knelt down next to her. "A judge is someone who helps people be fair, like when you and your friend both want the same toy, and I help you take turns. That's what judges do, but for grown-ups with bigger problems." "That sounds hard." "It is hard, but important things usually are." Catherine smiled at both of us. "She's wise, this one." My phone buzzed. A text from Laura. "Good luck today. You've got this." Another from Bennett. "Remember, you earned this. Now go show them what you're made of." And one from an unknown number. I opened it hesitantly. "Emily, it's your mother. I started therapy last week. It's harder than I expected, but I'm trying. I hope your first day goes well. I'm proud of you. Love, Mom." I stared at the message for a long moment. Progress. Small, uncertain, but real. Catherine checked her watch. "We should head down. Court starts in 20 minutes. I changed into my robe, the black fabric heavy and symbolic. My hands shook as I fastened the front. "Do I look like a judge?" I asked. "You look like someone who fought for this. That's better." We walked through the courthouse halls together, my heels clicking on marble floors. Other attorneys nodded respectfully. Some did double takes, seeing someone my age in robes. 28 was young for a judge, but Catherine was right. I had earned this through fire. The bailiff opened the courtroom doors. "All rise. The Denver County Family Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Emily Wilson presiding." I walked to the bench, legs steady despite my racing heart. The courtroom was full. The mother sat at the defendant's table looking exhausted and afraid. Her lawyer whispered to her. The father sat across the aisle with his attorney, confident and composed. I had been that mother. I knew her fear intimately. "Please be seated," I said. Everyone sat. I looked at the case file in front of me. Rebecca Davis versus Thomas Davis. Custody of one child. Olivia, age 5. Mother recently laid off from teaching position due to school budget cuts. Father claiming she's unstable, citing her job loss and medical history of anxiety. The same story, different names. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to make something clear. This courtroom doesn't deal in perfect people, because perfect people don't exist. We deal in facts, in evidence, and in what serves the best interest of the child. Miss Davis, Mr. Davis, I'm going to listen to both of you. I'm going to look at the evidence, and I'm going to make a decision based on what's real, not on appearances or assumptions." The mother's lawyer looked surprised. The father's lawyer looked concerned. "Good. Let's proceed." The hearing lasted 3 hours. I listened to testimony about job loss, about anxiety medication, about missed pickups and arguments. I asked questions the other lawyers hadn't thought to ask about support systems, about who attended parent-teacher conferences, about who knew the child's favorite book, her allergies, her best friend's name. The father couldn't answer most of those questions. The mother could answer all of them. I reviewed financial records, medical records, school reports. I called for a brief recess and spoke privately with the court-appointed guardian ad litem who had interviewed the child. "What did Olivia say?" I asked. "She wants to live with her mom. She says her mom is sad sometimes but always takes care of her. She says her dad is busy and sometimes forgets to make dinner." Facts, not judgments. When court reconvened, I delivered my ruling. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, I find that Miss Davis has provided consistent, loving care for her daughter despite facing significant challenges. Job loss is not moral failure. Anxiety is not inability. Miss Davis has sought help, maintained treatment, and continued to prioritize her child's needs. Mr. Davis, while a capable parent, has demonstrated less involvement in the day-to-day care of Olivia. I looked at Rebecca Davis. She was crying silently. Therefore, I award primary physical custody to Miss Davis. Mr. Davis will have standard visitation every other weekend and one evening per week. Both parties will continue in family therapy to improve communication. Rebecca's lawyer hugged her client. The father looked angry but didn't object. His lawyer whispered to him, probably explaining that this was a fair ruling. I brought down the gavel softly. "This court is adjourned." As everyone filed out, Rebecca Davis approached the bench. "Your Honor, may I say something?" "Of course." "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for understanding that struggling doesn't mean failing." I nodded, not trusting my voice. I wanted to tell her I had been her, that I understood because I had sat in her chair and felt her fear. But judges don't share their stories from the bench. "Take care of yourself and Olivia," I said instead. "You're stronger than you know." She left, and I sat alone in the empty courtroom. My first case, my first ruling. It felt right. Catherine appeared at the door. "How do you feel?" "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Good. Because you have 3 more cases this afternoon." I laughed. No rest for the weary. "Nope. Welcome to family court." That evening, I picked up Emma from the courthouse daycare. She ran to me with a drawing she had made, all purple scribbles and yellow sunshine. "This is you, Mommy. You're the judge." "That's beautiful, baby. Let's put it on our fridge." We drove home through Denver traffic, Emma chattering about her day. A boy had shared his goldfish crackers with her. They had played house. Everything was perfect in the world of a 3-year-old. Our apartment was still sparse, furniture from thrift stores and IKEA. But Emma's room had painted walls in soft pink, a bookshelf full of stories, and a nightlight that projected stars on the ceiling. She had everything she needed. After dinner, bath time, and 3 stories, I tucked her into bed. "Mommy, will I see Grandma Margaret soon?" My chest tightened. "Would you like to?" "I guess." She seemed sad. Children see so much more than we think they do. "Grandma made some mistakes, but she's working to be better. Maybe we'll visit her soon." "Okay." Emma yawned. "I love you, Mommy." "I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the stars." I kissed her forehead and turned off the light, leaving the door cracked. In the kitchen, I poured a glass of water and stood at the window overlooking the street. My phone rang. My mother. I hesitated, then answered. "Hi, Mom." "Emily, I wasn't sure you'd pick up." I almost didn't. Silence. Then, "I'm calling because my therapist suggested I talk to you about something. She said I need to take accountability for specific things I did, not just apologize in general terms." "Okay." My mother's voice shook. When you were 8, you won the spelling bee at school. I told you that second place would have been better because the winner gets too much attention. I thought I was teaching you humility, but really, I was teaching you that achievement was something to be ashamed of. I sat down, memories flooding back. I remember that. When you graduated law school, I didn't come to the ceremony because I said I had a headache. The truth was, I was jealous. You had accomplished something I never did. And instead of being proud, I resented you for it. Mom, please, let me finish. When James cheated on you, I told you that you must have done something to drive him away. I blamed you for his betrayal because it was easier than admitting men sometimes just make terrible choices. I added to your pain when I should have been your safe place to fall. Tears ran down my face. Why are you telling me this now? Because my therapist made me list every time I hurt you. The list was 7 pages long, Emily. 7 pages of ways I damaged my own daughter. And I need you to know that. I see it now. I see what I did. It wasn't love. It was control and fear, and my own broken pieces cutting into you. What were you afraid of? That you would be better than me, that you would succeed where I failed. I dropped out of college when I got pregnant with you. I married your father because it was expected, not because I loved him. He left when you were 2, and I spent the rest of my life bitter about choices I made but blamed everyone else for. When you started becoming the woman I couldn't be, I tried to cut you down so I wouldn't have to face my own regrets. The honesty was devastating. I don't know what to say, Mom. You don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did and that it was never your fault. You were always enough. More than enough. I was the one who was broken. I wiped my eyes. Are you really doing the therapy? Really working on this? Twice a week. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Looking at yourself honestly, seeing all the ways you've failed. It's brutal. But I owe it to you and to Emma. I don't want her to grow up with a grandmother who teaches her that love comes with conditions. Emma asked about you tonight. My mother's breath caught. She did? She said you seemed sad. I am sad. I'm grieving the relationship we should have had, the mother I should have been. Maybe we can build something new. Not what we had, but something honest. I'd like that, if you're willing. But I need time, Mom. What you did, trying to take Emma, that hurt more than anything else you've ever done. I need to trust that you've really changed before I can let you back into our lives completely. I understand. I'll wait as long as it takes. We sat in silence for a moment, the phone line connecting us across miles and years of damage. Mom? Do you remember when I was 10 and I wanted to quit piano lessons because I wasn't good enough? You were plenty good enough. You just made one mistake in a recital and decided you were terrible. You told me that quitting was for weak people, that Wilson women don't give up. I held on to that when everything fell apart. When I wanted to give up, I heard your voice saying that. So maybe you didn't get everything wrong. My mother made a sound between a laugh and a sob. I'll take that. It's more than I deserve. We all deserve chances to be better. That's what I'm learning. Thank you, Emily, for giving me this chance. Don't waste it. I won't. We hung up, and I sat in the dark kitchen for a long time. Healing wasn't linear. It was messy and slow and sometimes painful, but it was possible. Maybe. 6 months later, I stood in the same courtroom where this had all begun, but this time, I was there by choice. Judge Thompson had invited me to speak at a family law conference about judicial integrity and personal experience, about how understanding struggle makes us better judges. Catherine sat in the front row, along with David Bennett and Laura. My mother sat in the back, quiet but present. I was fired from my first legal job. I told the room full of judges and attorneys. I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. I worked minimum wage jobs while studying for the bar exam a second time. My own mother sued me for custody of my daughter. 6 months ago, I was sitting where many of your clients sit, terrified and certain I had already lost. People shifted in their seats. This wasn't the usual conference speech. I tell you this not for sympathy, but for perspective. Every person who comes before us in family court is in crisis. They're scared. They're being judged. They're desperate for someone to see their humanity underneath their circumstances. We have immense power to help or to harm. I saw several judges nodding. I learned that job loss doesn't equal moral failure, that seeking mental health treatment is strength, not weakness, that people in their worst moments still deserve dignity and fair treatment. These aren't abstract concepts to me. They're survival lessons. I told them about my case, about Margaret's testimony, about sitting in that chair, knowing everyone believed I was broken. I told them about David and Catherine and how they saw past the surface to the truth underneath. Now I sit on the bench and I see people like I was, struggling parents, imperfect people trying their best. And I remember what it felt like to be judged without being truly seen. So I make sure I see them, all of them, because that's what justice actually requires. The applause was long and genuine. Afterward, people approached to share their own stories. A judge who had struggled with addiction and clawed her way back. A lawyer who had been homeless for 6 months. We all had scars. The question was whether we let those scars make us more compassionate or more harsh. My mother waited until everyone else had left. She approached slowly, uncertain of her welcome. That was powerful, Emily. Thanks for coming. I wouldn't have missed it. She paused. I've been meaning to ask. Could I take Emma to the park this Saturday with the supervisor? Of course. I've completed 4 months of therapy and I'd like to spend more time with her. I studied my mother's face. She looked different somehow, softer. The sharp edges of judgment had worn down. Okay, but Mom, if you ever use her, ever try to manipulate the situation again, I promise, I'm not that person anymore, or I'm trying not to be. That's all any of us can do. Try. Saturday came. I drove Emma to the park where my mother waited with the court-appointed supervisor, a kind woman named Susan. Margaret had brought a kite, and she and Emma spent an hour running across the grass, laughing as the kite soared. I sat on a bench watching them, feeling something complicated in my chest. Not forgiveness entirely, but maybe the beginning of it. My mother was trying, really trying. Emma ran over, breathless. Mommy, Grandma taught me how to fly a kite. Did you see? I saw, baby. You were amazing. My mother approached more hesitantly. She's wonderful, Emily. You've done such a beautiful job raising her. Thank you. I mean it. I look at her, and I see all the things I wish I had been for you. Patient, encouraging, present. Her eyes filled with tears. I can't get those years back with you, but maybe I can be better for her. Maybe we can both be better together. Margaret smiled, tentative and hopeful. I'd like that. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. We still had years of work ahead, therapy sessions, difficult conversations, and moments of backsliding. But it was real, honest, and that was worth more than any perfect fantasy. That night, after putting Emma to bed, I sat at my desk and wrote in the journal I had started keeping. I learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing back up when everyone expects you to stay down. I learned that our worst moments don't define us unless we let them. I learned that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And I learned that sometimes the people who hurt us most are fighting their own battles we can't see. I thought about Rebecca Davis, the mother from my first case. I had checked on her through the court records. She had found a new teaching position. Olivia was thriving. Sometimes the system worked. I learned that being a judge isn't about being perfect. It's about being fair. It's about remembering that every person standing before you is someone's daughter, someone's mother, someone fighting to survive their own story. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. Great speech today. Proud of you. Another from Bennett. You're changing the system from the inside. Keep it up. And one from my mother. Thank you for today, for letting me try. I love you. I typed back. I love you too, Mom. See you next Saturday. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And that was enough. Emma called from her room. Mommy, I can't sleep. I closed my journal and went to her, crawling into the small bed beside her. What's wrong, sweetheart? Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to tell you something. What's that? You're the best mommy in the whole world, even better than Olivia's mommy, and she makes really good cookies. I laughed and pulled her close. That's high praise. It's true. You're strong like a superhero. I'm not a superhero, baby. I'm just your mom. That's the same thing. Maybe she was right. Maybe being a mother, showing up every day despite fear and exhaustion and self-doubt, was its own kind of heroism. Not the cape-wearing kind, but the quiet strength of simply not giving up. Go to sleep, Emma. Tomorrow's a new day. What are we doing tomorrow? Living, learning, being together. That's all that matters. She nestled against me, and within minutes, her breathing deepened into sleep. I stayed there, holding my daughter, thinking about the long road that had brought us to this moment. They said I could barely hold a job. They said I was unstable. They said I wasn't enough. But I proved them wrong, not because I became a judge, though that helped, but because I never stopped being a mother. I never stopped fighting for the one thing that mattered most. And in the end, that was the only victory that counted. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever been judged for your worst moment instead of your whole story? Have you ever felt like giving up but found the strength to keep going anyway? Have you watched someone you love struggle and wished you could help them see their own strength? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that struggling doesn't mean failing, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people fighting real battles. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than their circumstances. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, your worst day doesn't write your whole story. You do. May you find the courage to stand up when everyone expects you to stay down. May you find people who see your truth beneath your struggles. And may you always remember that being imperfect and being enough are not opposites. They're the same thing. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And never forget that your story isn't over yet.